Hello, welcome to Converging Dialogues. This is Xavier Bonilla. On this episode, I'm very happy to have my friend, Monica Guzman, on the podcast again. I talked to her last year, and we had a really nice conversation about journalism at large. And at the time, she was writing her book, and I told her as soon as she finished, she had to come back on again. And so she did, and we had a very lovely conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation. And we talked all about her fantastic book. As a reminder, she is the director of digital and storytelling at Braver Angels. She also founded the award-winning Seattle newsletter, The Evergrey. She was named one of 50 most influential women in Seattle. She was a 2019 fellow for the Henry M. Jackson Foundation. She was also a fellow at the Nieman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University. And she is the author of the wonderful book, I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times, which is available. And that's what we talk about in the conversation. We start by talking about the main theses of her book, on seeing the humanity in everyone and how we use curiosity. It's a big tenet for her in her writing. We talk about the 3 challenges of human nature. We talk about how can we scale our individual interactions. Many times people will have nice interactions with someone, or they'll have a kind of breakthrough moment, but we talk about how can we scale that? How can we do that with many people and with groups? We talk about us versus them. We talk about what is it like to change an opinion, and we kind of give some examples. She shares an example, I share an example of places where we've changed our opinions and why that can be important. We talk about the assumptions of other groups. We talk about curiosity and the intoit model. We talk about knowledge and filling the gaps. And we talk about how to not make assumptions, along with many other topics. I have to say, Monica is such a wonderful person. She really just sees the humanity in everyone. Her book is absolutely fantastic. I can't recommend it more highly. And it's my hope that upon listening to this conversation, you'll not only get her book, but that you'll also support her and all of the wonderful things that she's doing at Braver Angels and elsewhere. And so now I bring you Monica Guzman. I'm here with Monica Guzman. Monica, very nice to have you on the podcast once again. I'm very happy about that. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. I am super excited for this.
Yeah, we had a fabulous conversation. I have to look it up. It's I think somewhere in the 30s, episode 30 something is when we had our conversation, and we talked about many topics, and you were just like in the beginning or middle stages of writing your book. I remember you mentioned it, and you were kind of talking about some of the concepts. And so, I try to be pretty sincere. And so when I tell folks, come back anytime, I really mean it. So here we are again. And your book is just about to come out very soon. It is called I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. And it's brilliant. And I'll just say this as an aside here. Really liked the illustrations throughout the book and on the cover, and really it has a lot of really awesome character to it. And whoever you got to do the illustrations was great, because I feel like it kind of mapped on to kind of like, you're very positive and light energy and things like that. It was just a nice match. I was reading it and I was like, this is her. This is definitely her.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. I have to shout out Haley Weaver of the Instagram account Haley Drew This. She's incredible, and she's the illustrator. And can't thank her enough, because the tone of those is just spot on.
Haley did a fantastic job, and it really, I think it gave a whole other whole like other boost to the book, you know. And I've seen this with some books now, is where they'll start really emphasizing illustrations or certain graphs and certain colors and things like that as a way to enhance, you know, not take away too much, but enhance. And it definitely did that. So that's great. So yes, so I'm super excited to talk about your book. I read it, I loved it. And before we do that, just remind people of who you are and what you do, what's your day job, and your many day jobs, your many things you're involved in. So tell us.
It's quite a lot, but the headline is I am a journalist for a couple of decades. That's been the running thread, but I am the head of digital and storytelling at Braver Angels, the nation's largest grassroots cross-partisan organization committed to depolarizing America. Super easy. Super chill. No, very critical and important.
We love Braver Angels. We love Braver Angels. You're great there. John Wood Jr. is great. Everybody over there is great over there. So I'm really happy that you're really kind of in the leadership role over there. It's nice.
Yeah, no, that's been awesome. And I'm also a host at Crosscut, which is a Northwest media site of as many curious conversations with the newsmakers around our region as I can get.
Mm-hmm. No, it's wonderful. And you, I'm sure you'll mention it here again, but in the previous episode, I think we talked more about your kind of, you know, journey and some of the things you've done and stuff with Evergrey and things like that. And so I'm sure we'll reference it, but for folks that are interested for more of your kind of background in journalism and stuff, you can listen to the previous conversation we had.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into the book, and it's very nicely organized, you know, 5 parts, very short chapters. It's nice. I like that stuff. Most people think I read just, you know, dense philosophy from dead people from 100 years ago. And I do like that stuff, but I also like the easy stuff too. And your stuff was well written. It's really, really good. So here's my big takeaway from the book, right? And I made a tweet about this maybe yesterday or 2 days ago. I feel like your book is trying to do a very hard thing, which is trying to understand how do we see the humanity in other people, especially people that are different than us, whether they're different based on whatever demographic, different on their ideas, their politics. And I feel like that's the running thread in the book. Am I wrong on that, or what was the kind of major thesis for you?
No, I mean, as you've probably heard from a lot of authors, books can have such depth and layers to the author that there are many overlapping themes, but that is definitely one of them. And I would say it was one of the threads that runs at the heart of everything. Is I look around this world and what I see is all people. It is all people. We talk about ideas, we talk about institutions, we talk about all these structures and things that we've built to order our lives and to try to thrive together and to make sense of everything. But at the end of the day, the only agent of power is a person. The only agent of change is a person or groups of people. That's it. And to me, it can be both terrifying, but also really empowering and kind of awesome, because it helps bring you back to this idea of, man, if we feel like we are experts in ideas, but we don't consider people, and we don't try to make sure that we can see people and work with people and understand people, then what are we really doing?
Yes, I would 100% agree. This becomes very difficult, though, when you have people that are very different than you. They have different personalities, they have different temperaments, they have different experiences. And so I guess my point of emphasis here is, how do we reach out to individuals that are different than us? I mean, it's pretty, I don't want to say pretty easy, but more, I would say it's probably easier for folks that, you know, maybe have a similar background, maybe they, you know, same age, or, you know, same, come from the same, you know, region, or same political spectrum. It's a little bit easier, right? You have to do less work, quote unquote.
Exactly.
Although there's something to be said, maybe we'll get into it, about still trying to reach that person and their humanity, even though they may check a lot of boxes, because there's still the individuality that you're trying to find, right? You don't want to just rely on the heuristic. So, there's something there, but just in a kind of general sense, it's easier to kind of say like, oh yeah, we both voted for the same person, or we both, like these kinds of political principles. How do we try and find those human pieces with people that are super different for whatever reason? How just in a kind of general way to tee you up here, what do you think are the main pieces there of trying to reach others or to interact with others effectively that are so different seemingly from us?
Yeah, and I mean, the first thing is the mindset. The whole book is in the context of a very divided world, the dangerously divided times. And one of the key theses is that if you can't get curious across divides in a polarized world, you can't see the world at all. That to see your world, you have to see the people in it. And if you are having a lot of trouble or a lot of resistance to seeing the people around you clearly who are not like you, there's a lot you're going to be missing that is going to have potentially some severe consequences. And one of the ones that's been top of mind for me recently is fear. You're going to be so much more afraid of these things you don't understand or you don't see. And so to answer your question, the tool that I think does the most to guide us in that mandate of connecting and seeing people in order to see our world and build meaningful lives when things are so divided is curiosity. And people think of curiosity, at least, I get this impression that people see curiosity as this sort of, this thing I learned in kindergarten, this really nice, gosh, it's nice to be curious. It's delightful. It's about learning. You think of little brain emojis and everyone gets excited. No, what we don't often do is treat curiosity as a tool in our thinking that we can aim at the things we don't understand. So in my research for the book, all roads led to curiosity as a neurological, set of processes in our brain, as an aspect of our mind, the knowledge, emotion, the hunger to fill a gap between what we know and what we don't yet know, the power of that as an impulse, and what we can do to tap into that impulse so that it fuels this detective search, this constant wanting to know, this peering into the mystery of humanity, the mystery of a person's perspective.
We will definitely get to curiosity, and I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. So anything I may say is not to be obnoxiously contrarian.
No, and let me also say, I wrote a book about constructive disagreement. I welcome it. So don't, I appreciate the disclaimers, but also I love when ideas push at each other in conversation. That's fun.
Yeah. Well, the point is the same for me is I don't want to play devil's advocate the whole conversation, but I think sometimes what can happen is people can, again, like we were saying earlier, like, you're saying things that I agree with 100% of what you just said, right? Where I'm trying to push is, the other people, in the next room that are going to say, well, what about this? And, that doesn't fit for me, or, et cetera.
Yeah.
To try and, strengthen the arguments and the ideas.
Yeah.
So my first kind of pass at that is, I think maybe you can tell me what you think about this, but I think that like maybe humans are, I would say that there's probably an innate curiosity as a kind of fresh thoughts. I would say that just as to be human, we have to kind of assess and judge certain things in our environment that would include other people to see, is this a danger? Is this a threat at a basic evolutionary perspective? But I would say that there's probably a lot of people that just aren't curious about other people. They don't care. Like they're not interested. It's like, well, I don't want to be curious about that person, and I don't have to. You know, what do you say to those folks, right? Like you're pushing, like, look, we need to be curious about ourselves. We need to be curious about those around us, about our fellow humans, about people in our communities, people not in our communities. And some people just might be like, yeah, I don't want to do that, or I'm not interested in doing that. Is that just, well, that's just not for them? Or is there something further you can do there?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, because a lot of the pushback to these ideas has kind of come from that place of, but there are so many people that may not go all the way on this. What do we do about that? And my answer is we don't have to go all the way on this. First, we don't all have to go all the way. That is clear. And the other thing is, part of the richness of people as a plural is precisely our different interests and our different levels of investment in all kinds of things. That will never resolve. As agitated as we might feel about the things I think are most important, that everyone should behave like I do, everyone should believe what I do, they never will. So instead, what I think will change the world is every person getting one unit more curious in their own lives, in their own circles. So wherever you start, push at the boundaries. And I think it's fine if you start at, it's me, my family, a couple of friends, and I really don't care about anything else. It's like, well, chances are, just in that small circle that you have, you absolutely have opportunities to open doors into something unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Take one of those opportunities. Just take one that you wouldn't have taken. And then to those of us like you and me and others who are more naturally curious across divides and bridge builders in all these ways, well, our circles of concern might already be quite large. So, okay, well, push those even further. What does that mean to you? So that, I think, is not only the more pragmatic and realistic vision. I think that's the world-changing vision. Not to try to expect everyone to suddenly wake up in the morning and be a different person and want nothing more than to have lots of conversations with people who disagree with them. That's never going to happen. And that's okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it is kind of, for some folks, it might be very small steps of doing that. And then it will be one of these things where, over time you start to see, how much someone's kind of vision is or field of vision expands, and that might be, everyone is on a different journey, so that might be very slow for some, very fast, or it's not about the speed of it, but I think it's people are getting there in their own time. And so I would agree with that. So you described early on the SOS, right? The three challenges of human nature: sorting, othering, and siloing. So maybe just describe for us those three and why they pose such strong challenges for us at the moment.
Yeah. So I never thought of it that way. It begins with SOS as the big problem statement. When I talk about division and polarization, I'm talking about these three forces of human nature that have brought us to this place. They are all very natural instincts and parts of what it means to be human. We're not going to get rid of them, but we need to understand how they've become this perfect storm, this call for help. So sorting is our natural instinct to gather with those who are like us and therefore eventually separate. Othering is our natural instinct to build a distance between ourselves and those who are different. Siloing is our natural instinct to, over time, with the people with whom we are with the most and whom we hear from the most, we begin to echo each other's narratives and worldviews, and we begin to deepen our commitments to those opinions that we share. And in fact, social science research also shows that you're surrounded by people who share your opinions. Your opinions will become a little more what they are, a little more extreme, to use a charged word, but that will happen. So because of the interaction between those three forces right now in this very divided world, we really have to kind of look up and be like, uh-oh. And I think of this visual of the silo in particular. Old grain silos were not above ground, they were underground. And it's sort of, usually we don't think of the variable of time. Over time, when your feeds all say the same thing, when people's, echoes start to echo themselves, then you're digging a deeper and deeper and deeper hole to the point where hearing stuff from other silos just becomes that much harder and that much harder and that much harder. And the distance that you put between yourself and your other is that much bigger. All of these things get enhanced unless we correct them. And we have to take steps to correct them that are going to counteract the default settings of our world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with what you were saying in the book about the way we do this, because we see this all the time, right? We see this in our friend groups. We see this on social media. And in regards to the sorting piece, right? I think a lot of the times there's a healthy element of that, right?
Absolutely.
We have these elements of trying to discriminate in the very specific sense of the word, this from that, and we have these priors, and we have certain shortcuts that we use, and so most people like to stay comfortable. But I guess the question I have with a lot of this is, and this is just a running question I have in my mind, having multiple conversations with different people, is many of these ideas you're saying and that other people have said, they work. I think you have experiences seeing where you've moved the needle, right? I've had those experiences. I think it was in this conversation. I talked with Peter Coleman not too long ago.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, right? And the question I always have, and it's a hard question, right? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, is, to me, this becomes a problem of scale, right? If I live to be 90 years old and I just spend, majority of my time working on one-on-one relationships, trying to do these things. I mean, I essentially do that, but it's just never going to scale, right? It's just never going to scale to the way where we're now working with groups, and we're working with big communities, and we're working with, that's the problem, is you can have really nice, positive, constructive interactions and conversations with people, doing these types of breaking this kind of othering, not letting people have these echo chambers, and, showing a different perspective and not assuming, and, being curious about someone. And this works. It can work one-on-one. And in many ways, if you look at folks that have worked with people that are part of extreme groups, right? Neo-Nazis, KKK, other extreme groups, the ways in which some of them leave that behind is they have one-on-one experiences with the person that is the person that the other group they're othering. And it's like, oh, this is just, they got a family like I do. They have, similar interests in some ways. And that's important. But the problem where this breaks down is that when you try to start getting it a little bit bigger, and you try to start scaling it, it doesn't have enough weight to it. And so how do you kind of think about that problem, and maybe how we could maybe scale it a little bit?
Yeah. So for me, what scales is our choices and our postures toward others, especially toward those we disagree with. So completely agree with you. One-to-one conversations forever, I mean, they're going to be limited. But I think the assumption I'm reading in what you're saying, and I might be wrong, that I would push back on, is the assumption that each of these conversations is just an individual unit. You have a conversation, and then you're kind of back to square one, and then you have the next conversation, back to square one. But I think what happens is that every time we have one of these conversations, we learn some enduring things about humanity, right? And they train our brain to begin to almost get the effects of having had the one-to-one conversation, even when we just read about someone in a news article, even when we just saw a Twitter thread that we're not going to engage with. Suddenly our minds will go, well, you know what? If you actually talk to that person, it probably wouldn't come off this way. There's probably more there. There's a lot that you're missing. That's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of folks that I know do this work. I'll give you an example with my parents. My father, after the 2020 election, one of the interesting ways that he would tell you he became more open, and I would tell you he became more curious, does not match the mold. He had been up to that point someone who is buried in the news. And for him, that's Fox News, that's Rush Limbaugh, right? these voices that sort of gave him a story, and he got into it, and he was really into it and all of that. And we had a bunch of conversations about my work and research that I've been doing, and he even did a Braver Angels workshop. And then he made this choice to no longer watch the news that much, this kind of commentary. And he's told me over and over again how much more room he feels he has in his life to see who people really are and to think that issues might be more than what they seem. And so that, again, might feel like a minor step. It's not. It's a major step.
That's a big step. That's
what we choose to pay attention to, right? And so, one other thing that I heard in what you said is this idea that, one-to-one conversations, they're private, they're candid, they're open, but they're not on display. Put them out into the world, try to scale, right, via the technologies of scale, try to scale via media, via broad movements, and you run into, frankly, the institutions that are keeping polarization alive, even though the people in them wouldn't want to, right? And so these systems and structures have kind of become such that the kind of openness and humanity that we know is there becomes a lot harder to see when you start going into these places where many people gather. It just becomes harder. So it sort of kind of dies a little bit. It withers. You have to push harder to do it. Now, that is an enduring challenge. And I love all the efforts to change the institutions because they need to be happening concurrently with all of this. My own personal place where I'm putting my attention is in individual empowerment. I think there's a lot of hopelessness and resignation when one sees the dynamics at play out there in our society, and it can be easy to think that these things are happening to us, and then we forget again that it's all people. Our world is all people, and we do have the power.
Yeah, no, that I definitely agree with you on that, and I do think that is true. I do think that when people, you might not even know it's true in the moment, right? You have a conversation, you have an experience, right? You have a node of experience with somebody in conversation where, pushed you a little bit or challenged your thinking, or you think, I have to think about that. And that gets, stored somewhere in our body, in our mind, in our, kind of our hard drive somewhere. And I think having enough of those, it does start to evolve and change people. I would say, so you were right in how I was asking things. I would just say that there's still this mystery of how we can do that faster at a larger scale.
Right.
I mean, that's how it is, and you can't do that entirely. But I do think that there are some ways of maybe expediting some of that.
Yes.
When we think about kind of what you were saying about, maybe we'll get into this, but there's a way in which we have to. I think one of the downsides of the digital age is that we have too much information, right? Not that information's bad, but we basically get all of it, which is, insane. 300 years, 100 years ago, we weren't have access to all this stuff, and it's incredible. It's incredible to have that kind of technology, but we don't have the skills to learn how to sort it and to parse it and to, kind of sift it and say, okay, I don't need this. Okay, I'm going to focus here. And what many people are doing is just information dump. And that's unrealized problem now. And so learning a new skill legitimately of too much information or how do we organize it is a new thing we have to figure out.
Absolutely.
There's one thing here about this kind of us versus them. I think I was having this conversation, I don't remember with whom, where for a long time it was people would be in their group, their silo, and that was good enough, right? It was just, well, this is my crew, this is my group, this we think alike, and I don't really care what the other group. Doesn't really bother me. They do their thing, whatever. And there's still people that are like that, but there now is many people will have as a defining characteristic of their group being against the other group, right?
Yes.
So it's not just we all think alike and we get along and, forget what everybody else is doing or saying. Now it's, no, we're going to be a group that is the anti this other group, right? And now that's our that's the thing that's feeding us as our defining ideology or our identity. Yep. And that is a much bigger problem. Right. That is a much bigger problem. So you mentioned it kind of in the book, but what are you just kind of, I guess, general thoughts or specific thoughts about that phenomenon?
The book, and I have it right here, like the motif is eyes, right?
Yeah.
It's about seeing people. It's about seeing the world. Mm-hmm. And so here's kind of, I guess, my ultimate theory on that is, we need to push for change. We need to push for the right ways to evolve humanity's understanding of how best to live together, right? Mm-hmm. Like at the basic level. And we're constantly learning as small societies, as overlapping societies, what that means. So there are things we do need to fight against in that evolution. And there have definitely been times in our history, and it's probably happening now. I mean, it is happening now, where someone is fighting against something, and it will absolutely be looked at as the right fight. So here's what I think is ultimately critical, that when we identify against something that we are fighting against, that we are pushing against, that we have a clear view and understanding of what motivates the other side. And it's not an intellectual mission. It's not, here's the logic map, here's the reasoning, here's the thought pieces that I've read. That's not enough, right? Because the mystery of people is too deep. And so what I look around the world and I'm afraid that I am seeing is a lot of people who are cloaking themselves as being against a group of other people whom they believe X, Y, and Z for X, Y, and Z reasons, but that they haven't taken the time, they haven't taken the actions, they haven't been proactive enough to go and meet those people. Again, not just the theory, not just the thought pieces, not just the group stereotypes, the actual human beings. So that is the fighter that I most trust. But I'm afraid with the dynamics that we are in, there's just fewer opportunities to become that kind of person, right? To go and meet and talk and make sure that you do that piece. And that it's becoming wildly unpopular because it feels like a waste of time. For the same reason that you mentioned, we are impatient. We need this done now.
Well, yes, it's unpopular because it's a waste of time, or seemingly, but I think it's also another wrinkle to this now, which makes it much more harder to change, is these types of ways of thinking are highly incentivized in terms of status, in terms of grouping, and in terms of money.
That's right.
On all angles of this, and that's it's kind of a funny, not funny analogy, but I mean, it really is like the Hunger Games. I mean, it's just, it's really, really not good for us because we're missing the person. And that's, look, you can disagree with somebody's ideas, but if you still can say, I still appreciate you as a person and we can work on things and there's other things, even though there's one disagreement. And I don't hear that. People become very exercised about, their all this animus towards this idea. And look, that could be fine. You could have a strong opinion against something. But that it just doesn't. I agree with you. The people that are fighting those things, I don't trust because that's all it is. So have you ever taken the time to think about why people are doing this, or why are they thinking this way, or why are they choosing to do this? And you still disagree, but that tact of doing that is I don't think in the long run very helpful.
Yeah, so and that's what I think is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to have people see this contradiction between conviction and curiosity. It's a myth. It's not a contradiction. People today believe I am either a fighter or I'm wishy-washy trying to understand both sides or whatever. Like that I just think that's an oversimplification of a true ideal, which is like, why would we want to live in a society and have a conversation about ideas that are not driven toward ultimately finding the best idea? And how could ultimately finding the best idea involve shutting the door to further conversation that could challenge those ideas? It doesn't make sense. So, so that's the ideal. The ideal is the curious mind who can be as passionate about anything, can have the convictions going deep into the root. But when given an opportunity to hear from someone who comes from a different direction and has arrived at a different conclusion, will go, ooh, let me sit down with this person. I mean, that's magic. That's magic, you know? And you're right, it doesn't get rewarded, but it should, and I think it will.
Yes, I think that's the goal, right? How do we reward those types of exchanges? I'll let me pull the thread out here a little bit, make it a little bit more tangible. So, people have, I think, pretty lame attempts at doing this, if I'm honest. People will pick on me about being the middle person, the centrist, and the both siding, whatever. And I feel like people's insults or put downs are always pretty lame. They don't really punch as well. I look at it and I laugh. That's funny. But and again, I've said this in different places. I'm a centrist in some things, or moderate in some ways. You kind of see those. They're not exactly the same, but I see them as in the same world because of my history, because of my experiences. I've been on both sides politically. I've been religious and non-religious. I've in my short life, I've had a lot of experiences, and I don't know everything, obviously, but I've come to this point where, there's life is complicated, people are complicated, and there is very few things that we can feel 98% so adamantly and strongly on, right? I think there are some things for sure, but there's a lot of things that have a lot of, even the things that are seemingly that way, we still need to have some reserve for saying, well, wait a minute. But most people will say this as that I'm not very passionate about things. If you talk to my family or people that know me, I am a terribly passionate person. I am very passionate about my beliefs and my ideas. But I think that I try to explain this and people just don't really, I think, get it. But I can feel very passionately and strongly about something and still hold different ideas and opinions about it. And it doesn't,
right.
I can put it on the shelf and be like, okay, that's my opinion. And then let me just see all the other opinions. And it doesn't mean I'm I put a fence around me and say well, here's my opinion, not going to change it, but I'll listen to you guys talk about this. No, I'll let it say, oh, maybe there's some things here or whatever. But the people will misunderstand me as being not very passionate or opinionated. And it's ask my family. I was too opinionated for too long. But even in the things that I feel pretty strongly about because I have expertise or I've studied or whatever, I still try to understand different ideas about it, different examples about it. And it's sometimes hard. I think if you do it enough, it's easier. And there's still moments where I'll be like, no, this is bullshit and this is why, and whatever. But I think that it's hard for people. I feel like they feel like they're giving up, right? If they don't have a strong opinion, they're letting go of something. They're letting go of their principles, and then they're letting go of who they are. They're betraying themselves, and that's not what that is. You can still have that. You can still do those things. And that's what it is. I think we're so. I think the way we communicate has conflated opinions with the people who hold them. That who are you if you are not billboarding your opinion in some key way? I remember I joined Twitter in the very early days, 2007. And back then it would have been so strange to have, your Twitter name be your cause. Yeah. And now it's sort of par for the course. You have to billboard, you have to billboard. You have to be what you believe. Whoa. I mean, no wonder we feel this sense of betrayal
to ourselves when we hold our opinions more loosely. I never thought of it that way. And in my own life, like the best metaphor I found for this is the smartphones. There's a user, experience feature of just about all smartphones where you have the apps, little squares on your screen, right? And if you want to move them, edit them, remove them, you activate this little wiggle feature. It happens on iOS, it happens on Android, and the apps will sort of sit there on your screen, but you can make them wiggle. And so when they wiggle, that's a sign to you that, oh, move me around, get rid of me if you want, put me in another folder, like do what you want. That is what I do in conversations across disagreement. That is what I seek to do with my own beliefs. I don't let go of them, but I let them wiggle. Why? Because I want to leave room in between them. Otherwise, how am I going to learn? Otherwise, how am I going to be surprised? And if I'm not surprised, how can I be anything other than, well, I'm just going to stick to my own guns, even though this world is extraordinarily complex and I've only seen a tiny little slice of it. What sense does that make?
Yeah.
Just doesn't add up.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about this. This is maybe more of a personal question, so maybe you can answer it if you want. Two things. What's a strong opinion that you have that you really haven't changed? And then what's a strong opinion you now have that has become as a result of like conversations and experiences and thinking?
Oh my gosh, I have something very recent.
Okay, go ahead.
It's vulnerable, but I'm going to go for it.
Go ahead.
So for a long time, abortion has been a big issue for myself and for my family. I was raised Catholic in Mexico, right? So Mexican Catholicism is a particular brand of Catholicism, unquestionably anti, the pro-choice movement, unquestionably pro-life. This was morally very, very set into me. I really enjoyed and got a lot out of my Catholic upbringing. I'm no longer a practicing Catholic. And not to mention my mother. My mother, when I was in high school, was a pro-life activist. She started the Right to Life club at my Catholic high school. It didn't have one before. She got to where she would take students down to the March for Life in Washington, D.C., which I believe still happens every year. And for her, it is this like moral mandate. And it's honestly beautiful. Like I've always admired her for it. And I share in her moral sense about abortion. I really do. And there was in high school, when she started becoming very active, even in our local community, we lived in a small town in New Hampshire, she would work at a clinic that counseled women who were considering getting abortions. And she would come home and she and I would just get into it because I believed, and I still believe, that abortion should be legal. And so, oh my gosh, you can imagine this has been a lifelong conversation. She and I pick up this conversation that started when I was young and never truly ended, and we're still having it. But the opinion that has never changed is that I believe abortion should be legal. But here's something that has changed recently as a result of conversation across difference. So at Braver Angels, we have the Braver Angels podcast. And part of the podcast is something we call the Braver Angels Roundtable. We get two people who are more conservative and two people who are more liberal talking about an issue that is really tough in a certain structured way that at Braver Angels we know, like, oh my God, leads to so many amazing insights. It never fails. We followed the structure with abortion. And it was me and one other, liberal who believes abortion should be legal, and two of our colleagues who are more conservative and believe abortion should be illegal. And so there was a question that my colleague, April Lawson, now April Cornfield, she just got married, who heads up the debates at Braver Angels. She's conservative. And she asked me and my fellow liberal on that podcast, but how... I had said, look, morally, I get it. Morally, I think there's something really anti-life happening with abortion. I get it, and I talked about my mother and all of that. And so she asked, but how is it not murder? How is it not murder, right? And so I gave an answer that was the best answer I could give in that podcast. Now, then days went by because ideas cook in our heads slowly. They simmer, right? Days went by and I'm having these conversations with myself in my own head. Like, I have up until now believed that abortion should be legal, but that it is not murder. Why isn't it murder? I mean, I believe that it is a life. I do believe life begins at conception, but it's not murder. It can't be because I believe abortion should be legal. And so finally it dawned on me. I was like, oh my gosh, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to wrestle two things together that are not actually together. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get the two opposite poles of the two poles of a magnet that are keep repelling each other. I'm trying to stick them together with all my might. Mm-hmm. And what I realized, and I remember the moment it happened, I was in the car driving. I was like, oh my gosh, I do believe abortion is murder. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that abortion should be legal. I continue to believe that. Mm-hmm. And the aha moment for me was, that is what I believe, and I don't need to reconcile those two things. Why do I need to forcibly reconcile those two? Why do I need to rationalize that those two beliefs, which are contradictory and extremely troubling, need to be reconciled? What if I don't have to believe that they're reconciled? And right then I pulled over and I called April. And I told her, April, you have to know, mm-hmm. your question has been sitting in my mind, and I have a different answer. I do believe abortion is murder, but I still believe it should be legal. Mm-hmm. And so that led to an amazing conversation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that's still that's going to stay with me a while.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, I appreciate you sharing. That's a obviously a huge topic, and it's, bioethical one and a moral one. Mm-hmm. And especially, for yourself as a woman, it's more particularly salient. But I it's interesting about that too, is I feel the same way. I mean, I'm pretty pro-choice. But I totally get it. I mean, I get both sides, and I don't have any judgments whatsoever for either side. Like I fully get it. I fully get it on both sides. And people can say, well, you're a dude, you don't have to fair, maybe, sure. But yeah, I fully I mean, I have plenty of people in my family and, that are very pro-life, and I get it. I totally get it. I don't have any negative things to say, and pro-choice too. I totally get it. Nothing negative to say. But it is a difficult thing. But I think you're right. Not everything needs to be reconciled. Just a footnote on this. I think we don't know where life begins, and I don't think it is conception personally. I think it's, where do we have consciousness? Where do we have what it is to be you, and how you understand that is undetermined. And because you have a heartbeat and a brain and nerves and reflexes, I don't think that necessarily means life. It could, but I think it's a question mark that we don't know. And so that's kind of
what I love about questions like that is there's no one else who's going to solve that for us.
No.
I love that about it. Science, right. I think science has done all of its work, and this is ultimately a subjective question.
Yes.
Does life begin whenever we decide it does?
Yeah, it's a very gray thing, which is strange, because it's like everyone is born, that's breathing right now. It's like, how do we still not know our own origins? And we don't know the origins of, the universe and the planet. It's just, we're here, but we don't know all it's just, they're unanswered things. Yeah. It's just strange to think about. Same thing on the other end of it, with death, but it's just I think maybe because of that is just kind of I could totally see one way or the other where people go with this. There's not a hard and fast boom, we can know it, and very specifically, and I think that's where kind of the gray is a little bit there. I have not nearly the same, but it's kind of in the same universe in this way of eating certain animals. I will just say, I'm a big hypocrite. It's a walking contradiction. I know it. I don't know what to say. So one of these issues where I have this problem as well is with kind of eating certain animals, and we research about animal minds and things like that. And one in particular is the octopus. I love the octopus. It's one of my favorite sea animals, and I have a very difficult time eating octopus now. If I'm honest, when they are served as a option on a menu. They taste great. I've had it before. And anytime I have had it, I feel tremendous amounts of guilt because I'm like, oh, we know that they're kind of like sentient and maybe conscious, and like they definitely are aware, and like they're super like, cognitively like, awesome, and like they're just, and it just feels bad. It feels wrong. And I don't eat it often. I rarely eat octopus, partly because of that. But we know now that there's certain farm animals that have sentience, and they're very aware of how they're being mistreated and when they die. And it doesn't make me feel great. It just, it doesn't. All that said, I love the taste of different types of meat. I have no willpower in this area to like push back against that, and it just bothers me. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna figure it out as I get older. I don't need to figure it all out right now. But damn it, like I don't feel the best sometimes. Sometimes I don't think about it, and it's a complete like obvious contradiction in my head, right? Because I have tried to be vegetarian. I can't do it. It is so hard for me. It's so hard for me. So
man, I love that example because it illustrates something that I have really valued in the way that I look at these kinds of struggles across disagreements or whatever, which is the values that are put into tension. Mm-hmm. Right. So for me on abortion, there's this, I put a high value on what for me is sort of like the sanctity and meaning of human life. Mm-hmm. And I choose to interpret, right, and carry that over into the period of time when a fetus is inside a woman's body to an extent. But I also highly value the agency women should have in their lives to write their own stories and make these choices about what happens when. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, right? And all these other things come into play. And for you with the octopus, I mean, I can guess at some, but only you know what they truly are, right? There is a little bit of that value of, well, it tastes good, Yeah, and I like to enjoy like the gastronomical like experiences that are out there for me. There's a value of you are placing a value on sentience that separates some animals from others. And so there's a lot of things that go into that for you, and all of this stuff. And there might be, for me, sometimes there's also a value for me on food. So I'm not putting this on you because I don't know, but for me on food, there's also this value of, I want to be able to eat what is offered, and I don't want to be the person that goes, no, can't. There's a value on that for me. I don't know if there is for you. And then all of them intersect and interact and wrestle with each other. And again, we all want resolution, right? So you said, I'm still figuring this out. And what the assumption behind that is, you have to figure it out. What if you don't?
Maybe not.
What if you don't?
My thing is it bothers me enough where I want to.
And why does it bother you?
Because of the information I know about it. Because we know that these animals are intelligent and they're sentient, and they know when they're being killed. They know when they're being tortured. They know when they're being, and it can't only just be for the pleasure of another animal, right? There's other things I could be eating. There's other things I could be, doing. And it's that knowing that information is what I can't like ignore.
And that's a sign that value for you is important, might even be rising in importance. So the question then becomes, will it continue to rise and heat so much that it will force you to make some tough choices? Or will it over time settle and you'll find your way to just kind of make peace with that for the sake of the other things that you enjoy about eating octopus? And so what I love about it is none of us knows. Not even you know.
Well, not even you know. And I don't feel like I have to have like until I figure this out, I can't do this, or I should do this, or whatever. And so it's an interesting thing. It becomes one of those things where I was at a restaurant recently and I was looking at the menu and I see it on the menu. And I'm literally like in my mind, like, just like, oh my God, like I haven't had it in a while. I shouldn't, maybe I should. And this is totally just my internal like value, right? Like other people are like, sure, I'm going to get that and I'm going to get everything else. Like it's not as much of a value for them. Exactly. And internally I'm like, having a war with myself of what am I going to do? But it is interesting though, because I think it also is like, I don't know, I'm a weird person, right? But it's a weird thing because like if I was served that or offered that, kind of like you were saying, I would totally eat it.
Interesting.
Because I wouldn't want to disrespect someone, right?
So that shows how important that is in the situation for you.
So for me, it's like,
right.
It becomes is it a volitional choice for me only? Yes. Okay, that's different. If it's still a volitional choice, but for someone else involved, okay, there's a lot of things going on, so I'm going to try and square that. And then there's just the other part of it where, again, I'm just a big hypocrite on this. As much as I care about animals and their sentience, anytime I go and visit another country, I will eat every single thing that is specific to that country. I love this example so much. And I'm like, I feel very guilty about admitting this, but I've had ostrich, I've had alligator, I've had fermented shark, I've had whale.
You've had whale?
In Iceland, yeah. Wow. And not like, this isn't something I've had it once or twice in my life maybe, and I wanted to try and see how it was, and I didn't get like a massive meal and it was offered, but I will try different things when I'm in another place because I want to know the culture. I want to know what's unique to that place. Anytime I travel abroad, I never eat anything that I can get at home, right? And so it's
so cool.
I don't know. It's a weird thing, and I feel the like the tension
tug of war within yourself,
the tug of war, and it's like
that's. I mean, you said something so interesting. You said, "I'm such a hypocrite. I'm just being a hypocrite." I am so amused sometimes by the way that sides in the cultural wars and the political divide will launch that accusation of hypocrisy. Mm-hmm. We're all hypocrites all the time. Hypocrisy, like the charge of hypocrisy comes with this assumption that we can and should and absolutely will someday totally act in line with our top values all the time. But the reason that will never happen is precisely because of your example with the octopus. Not all of our complex situations are just resolved just like that if we just sit and think about it for a minute. That's not going to do it. Yeah. These wicked issues like abortion, like gun regulations, like immigration, they last unresolved because they're not easy to resolve.
Yes, there's too many parts. There's too many moving parts. It's hard.
And they keep evolving. Now, they might resolve. Many things do, but it's a long game, with some of this stuff. And we don't know. So, so it's coming back to this theme of impatience. Like we want this resolution and we feel like we are bad people if it doesn't line up logically, right? Like I had sort of thought, well, I am a hypocrite, and I am. If I am a bad person, I'm a hypocrite, but I choose not to believe that means I'm bad. I'm a hypocrite and I'm a bad person if I hold both beliefs, that abortion should be legal and that women should be able to have it, and that it is murder. I'm a bad person if I allow both those beliefs to live in my head. I've just let go of that assumption. I've let go. I've accepted the tension. And it's helped me be less afraid of tensions in other places.
Yeah, I think it's like what you're not saying, but you are not an absolutist on murder. It's what it sounds like.
I guess so. I guess I have to accept that.
There are some situations or some instances where you're fine with murder.
I guess so. And I hate that. I hate it.
It sounds hard to say that out loud. Yes, it does sound horrible, but
I hate it. It's like eating octopus for you. That's not right. I can tell it's wrong. That sounded like a very bad parallel. Yes, I think you know what I mean.
Yes, I know what you mean.
I want to resolve it.
Yeah. But it's the same thing that people have about lying. I don't think lying's always 100% wrong.
Right. I agree.
My strong controversial opinion is I don't think torture is always wrong. That's a really hard one. And it's extremely in very specific situations, possibly as maybe an option to consider.
See, that's one where I just saw an opportunity to get curious. We're not going to do it because it's a podcast about something else. But if we were in normal conversation, I would, as soon as I could, find a way to have that conversation with you, because I disagree with you and I so want to know what led you to that.
Right.
I want to unpack that so badly. So my curiosity is like, come on, I know you're recording an interview, but let's go. And it's like, no, we're not going to do it now. Chill.
I'll totally explain it to you. So I'll just say two things on it. I was a pretty absolutist on it for a long time. And then I heard different examples and I had different conversations and I said, that's maybe not. And then I still don't have I'm not like gonna, that's not the hill I'm dying on, right? I could potentially be convinced otherwise, but it's enough where I'm at now where I'm, and I don't talk about it often, but it's enough where I'm at now where I'm like, we should at least be open for very rare instances where that may have to be an option on the table. And if I think the consequences of not doing that in very rare instances could be worse.
Right? I understand that.
That's my it doesn't feel right. It does not feel good. So anyways, but there's great example.
Right. I would want to dig in.
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one big piece in this section before we move on to other parts, which there's a quote in the book I really liked. You said it really nicely. You said, things can be underrepresented in your life, but overrepresented in your imagination. Nice. Very nice. I like that. And I think you were talking about this in the context of like liberal and conservative. And you made this, I know you put it, I think in your TED talk and I think other places about like what there's this perception gap, right? We'll talk about gaps in a minute. This gap of like how certain, that would just be political for a minute, what Republicans think Democrats believe and vice versa, what Democrats believe Republicans believe, and a lot of the times it's not true. Now, before you tell me about that, I do think what's becoming, and I absolutely hate conversations and arguments about definitions and terms, because everyone's got a different, it's a waste of time to me. I hate it. It's like, that's not what a Democrat is. That's not what a liberal is. This is what it really is. And like 10 people say it's 10 different things.
I think it can be very useful in some contexts and very distracting in others.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. But we'll just not have that conversation, but just in the general abstract of people will have these conversations about, well, Democrats think this or Republicans think this, and there's that perception gap. And so I believe that's where that phrase was coming out of. So just talk about kind of the perception gap, and you can use a political example if you want, because I think that's what you use in the book, of why that's not so good, and then how we can try and kind of fill those gaps with different knowledge bases.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, the perception gap is proven and demonstrated through polls and surveys that across the political divide, you ask one side what the other side believes, to kind of guesstimate it, and they will be so far off on certain issues, just miles off. So one of the examples I've used is on immigration. If you ask Republicans how many Democrats believe that there ought to be open borders, they will grossly overestimate how many Democrats actually believe there are open borders. Mm-hmm. And then going the other way, if you ask Democrats to guess how many Republicans believe that immigration is good for this country so long as it's properly controlled, again, you'll see we'll just get it wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this to me sort of comes back to that idea of we pride ourselves, I think, sometimes in being really fluent with facts and with ideas, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But we are getting an F on perspectives. Mm-hmm. We are failing in our understanding of other people's perspectives. Mm-hmm. So the perception gap is demonstrated. It's there. Mm-hmm. And one of your questions was what's behind it, mm-hmm. right? And I could go into a long explanation, but ultimately I think it's one word: it's fear. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's fear. Mm-hmm. When I've been a journalist for going on 20 years, fear sells.
Oh yeah.
to yourselves, right? Like we know that if there's an us and a them, well, go to Fox News any day of the week and you will see such violent language in the headlines. Ted Cruz rips into so-and-so, right? So-and-so slams so-and-so else. Mm-hmm. Now, that is not to pin it all on Fox News. I mean, there's plenty of outlets on the left. It's not always the same kind of like WrestleMania type visuals that you get, mm-hmm. but every group has its own way to completely to condescend, to create the battle and visualize it. At the New York Times, it's more intellectual, but it's still condescending. It can still be really condescending. Yes. So what happens, right? We tell these stories. It's slam, it's punch, it's looking down on people, and that kind of storytelling that drives our media, that is driven by our fear and the way that we will share those articles as long as they activate those parts of us. I mean, it just creates this cycle where what the other side actually thinks isn't important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't matter. This is about us. Yeah, right?
They become memes of something, right? It's not the actual thing. It's the kind of meme of the actual thing.
Exactly. So it is to the benefit of many media organizations, to have a conflict that is really raw and to push it, because conflicts are real. They're really there. But man, the story becomes a lot more like energizing and aggravating and mobilizing to the share, which keeps our media industry alive in an attention economy. When it draws on the language of othering, of the O and SOS. So that's what I think it ultimately is. The reason that we don't know what the other side really thinks about immigration is because we don't hear it. Mm-hmm. We don't hear what the other side really thinks about immigration. Mm-hmm. We only hear how against our thing they are. Mm-hmm. And then we draw assumptions. We just draw our false conclusions based on that because no one's actually told us and because we haven't paid attention to it when they do, because it's boring. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are.
I would agree. I think again, I am way overdue for a podcast conversation on immigration. I have some folks lined up to have that conversation, and I just need to sit down and do it. But yes, I think people, when they know my story, when they know, my dad's story and my family story and things like that, but family on all sides, actually, I have, and I've written about it, I've, about immigration, right? I have some, I'm complicated on that issue. I have some very liberal views on it, and I have some very conservative views on it.
But see, it goes back to your question: what's liberal and what's conservative?
Right. Traditionally, right? Yeah, the whole the path to citizenship, blah blah blah. I'm pretty much in favor of that. But I'm also it's a nuanced view. I do think strong border security, what's it called? A physical border and not virtual border, but how we donate or how we dole out visas is it's a type of border to control, and that's also super important. But and I think we should somewhat limit how many people come here. And really do a better job of how do we help folks acculturate to American culture and society, and that acculturation to American culture and society is an immigrant story, right? So it's not this weird white culture thing. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that's true for anybody, and so for any country, they have to figure those things out. And
so far when I've sat down with people and talked about immigration, if I came in thinking, oh, they're sort of flatly on this side, and they clearly, I think I'm going to sense some real resistance if I bring up, and I don't sense the resistance. That's part of why I think that this curious mindset is the right one, because when you actually get close to people you'll see a higher resolution on whatever you assume they believe, and it turns out it's just so much more complex. They actually do hold the same values you hold. They just they just put them in a different order.
Yeah, they organize it differently.
They organize it differently, and they stack rank it differently. So some people will eat the octopus without flinching, and others will hesitate to eat the octopus, not because any of them are bad people or hate octopuses. They just have values that they rank differently when it comes to eating octopus. You know what I mean? And so we look at those differences and we go evil, bad, but if you really just lay the values out on the table, you'll see that a lot of them are good, and that their conclusions come from a different kind of cocktail of them. But again, I'm not trying to equivocate and say that like all opinions are good. Well, no, some of them it's like, y'all, we've moved past that, haven't we?
And that's because people are different, but then also people have different experiences and backgrounds. And I think that the reason why overwhelmingly immigration is always a big issue is because of, I just see it as immigration and nationalism as two sides of the same coin. And that's always going.
That's well said.
I think that's always going to be it. If you really just get someone in an honest conversation, why do you care about this? Or why does it bother you if those people from another country come here and speak in their language or whatever? And it's like, because here in this country, and it's those words are very much a sense of, I think, pride of, look, this is my country. This is how we do things. And this is how we are. And it shouldn't be that. And that's a sense of, I think, patriotism, if you want, or some kind of nationalism. And so I think that's why it's always a charged conversation, because you can't really having a conversation about immigration is really having a conversation about, well, what kind of country do you want? And that comes from an idea of, I think I've written about it, that there's a healthy nationalism we should have. And that's, for a lot of people, that's where it's coming from. And so it's a very hard thing when one side is saying how you need to make all these concessions from people that don't live here and aren't from here. You're like, well, wait, I live here. I have generations here. Why do I have to make all these sacrifices and concessions? And, and vice versa. Some people have the other way. So I think those things are so wrapped up in like, it's like,
they're interrelated. They tug at each other. You can't talk about one without the other.
And they're interrelated with like 4 layers of identity. And so it's identity for me as an individual, identity for me as a group, identity for as a nation, identity. It's like, it's just like, and like, that's the like, I mean, it's just so many layers of identity. Like, that's why people get really emotionally charged about it.
The identity piece is important. And I want to say, because this is something I'm obviously very conscious about, the title of the book, I Never Thought of It That Way. It's named after what I think is an absolutely key moment in a curious life, which is being able to think or say, I never thought of it that way. When someone surprises you with an insight. And when you said nationalism and immigration are two sides of the same coin, I never thought of it that way moment. Doesn't mean I agree with you. It's a challenging I never thought of it that way moment. And one of the reasons why is because for me and many folks who tend to think like me, nationalism is already a bad word. But I've been unpacking that because I have also recently heard nationalism not used as a bad word. And I'm like, oh, what does it really mean? Maybe it is sort of like national pride, and it doesn't have to lead to Nazism, you know what I mean? But for some, it just is that. It leads to that so much that we're not even going to talk about it ever being good. So anyway, just want you to know that you've popped the thing in my head, which is exactly the point.
That's always fun. Yeah, I wrote a long piece on Medium about it, about a healthy nationalism, and my basic premise is that if we allow a group or a particular side to kind of monopolize the term and make it an evil or bad word, we miss out on the contents of the things about it that do make it important, really important. And
well put.
And that's, so it's like a kind of reclaiming of like, okay, wait a minute, that's not a dirty word. We can have an unhealthy nationalism, which is what most people think of. But I think we can also have and should have a healthy nationalism. And I kind of wrote the piece a way where it's just kind of like a little, the first part's like a little combative, right? It's just kind of like basically steel manning the other side's argument about like why we shouldn't have immigrants and foreigners. Right? I'm kind of steel manning that, right? And then the second half of the piece is like, yeah, but American culture and in the United States history is one of immigrants. That's our nationalism. And that's always been the case. And so that's the real thing. And I wrote it in a particular way that way. So, but anyways, I think that's a super important thing. The one thing I want to ask is about curiosity, right? So we've been talking kind of around it and stuff, right? But so describe to me your intoit model. You just kind of described an example of it and why you left off the W. And because
it looks bad written out. It's that simple.
And how we deal with friction within ourselves and how we can be curious. So just kind of describe those kind of concepts for which is a central part of the book.
Yeah. So the core starting point is that we have to kind of build friction when we come together in conversation. The real opportunity is not a meeting of minds, but a meeting of perspectives, a meeting of life paths, a meeting of experiences. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The excitement of conversation is that it's so unpredictable. You're creating something from scratch. Each conversation is its own unique place that never existed before and will never exist again. Mm-hmm. It's a meeting of that moment in those people's lives. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And when a person thinks or says, I never thought of it that way, in response to what they hear in a conversation, it is the clearest signal that some perspective has spanned the gap between that person and themselves, that something about that other person's perspective has landed with them. Not that, I agree with you. No, mm-hmm. Just, it literally like comes to your mind. We actually feel it physically. We do. There's a sensation. We use our language to talk about that sensation. Something clicks, something dawns, right? Light suddenly in our minds. There are so many physical sensations to mental processes. It's so cool when you really pay attention to it. So then what happens, it's like a seed is planted somewhere in the soil of your mind, but you don't know what's going to grow. You have no idea. So what you just said about nationalism and immigration, it's got me thinking. I can tell that was a seed now planted in my mind, but I have no clue where it's going to lead. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And that's actually really exciting to me. That's really cool, right? When April asked me that question about murder, which I had been asked before, but she did it so well, weaving together so many things in that conversation where everything was on the table and we were so open and vulnerable and real and respectful that it was the right climate for something big, right? And there it went. It planted in my head, and it took days. It took many days for me to understand that it had already changed something, right? That's the intoit model. The intoit model is about that. It's I never thought of that way. I dropped off the W again because semantically it just looked terrible on the page, and I'm just going to claim creative license to do that.
Sure, yeah.
But that's the intoit moment, and that to me is the reward of curiosity. Mm-hmm. It is the unit. It is the product. It is the metric. For weeks, if not months, I actually went through this mindful exercise where every single time I thought or said I never thought of it that way in my life, I would write it down. Mm-hmm. It was so cool. Mm-hmm. And it just gave me this new awareness mm-hmm. of how our minds and opinions actually work. Yeah. Oh man, it was mm-hmm. eye-opening. So yeah, so it's friction. It is friction. Here's my thinking on it is if you go a long time without ever thinking, I never thought of it that way, what kind of life are you living? What are you doing? Mm-hmm. You're never surprised nothing's working on you. Now, I think I would actually be really hard pressed to find a person who actually never. Pretty hard, but I think it is part of being a healthy, evolving human being that understands that their own view of the world is just their own view of the world, mm-hmm. and that the world itself can never simply be their own view, and that their own view gets richer and better and clearer and more wonderful mm-hmm. when it learns other views, and that the way to learn other views authentically is not to read a thought piece on the internet, but to talk to that person right. and to have your own unique interaction, a conversation, a space that you make yourselves, and that is beautiful and full of possibility and discovery. and uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think that's the way in which you describe it is really, really nice. I mean, whether it's intentional or not, there's a lot of traces of Kierkegaard's philosophy, Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy, a little bit of Heidegger's philosophy, and those kinds of concepts, right? Of how do we understand the other? How do we understand being in the world? How do we uncover the parts of ourselves we don't even know? There's a lot of that in kind of phenomenology and stuff. So I think it's really nice in how you're describing it. Before we just briefly talk about the towards the end of the book, we touched on this in the beginning. I just wanted to come back to it, which was we talk about in the book. You talk about gap knowledge and gap in knowledge, and how do we fill these gaps? Which sounds somewhat similar to Socratic method, right? Like, okay, there's something I don't know. How do I fill it? We can get information, okay, and keep going and just keep building on that. But I guess the counter, I agree with that. But I guess the counter I have to that is we can't just do information gathering. Right. At a certain point, we have to do something with that. Right. So there's a lot of interactions we have with different people and different perspectives, and that's all super essential. And in many ways, many folks I have at various points, that's their like challenge in front of them. Mm-hmm. But I guess looking a little bit down the road, right? Okay, let's say someone is able to do that more or less. What do we do with that knowledge? How do we synthesize and assess and then put it back into the world? Like, what are we supposed to do with all that information and knowledge that's filled in those gaps?
And see, what I'm reflecting on as you ask that is, and go with me on this, it's going to be a little strange.
Okay.
Why do we need an answer? So here's where that's coming from. I think in your question, what I'm reading is a sense that there has to be an intention, that whatever we know and learn and value, that if we don't set an intention, if we don't do something with our knowledge that we pick consciously, then our knowledge is just sitting in our brains with nothing going on. And see, I don't think that's true. Mm-hmm. I think that whether we have an intention about it or not, every single piece of information and everything that shapes our perspectives and all of our experiences and all of our values mixing, and that cocktail of things all messes in our heads is us.
Mm-hmm, sure.
What we do in our daily lives is the answer to your question. Some of us the blend of those things going in their heads will make them be like my mother, embracing a cause, a political one, right? That she devoted much of her life to. And others, for others, it may not be a political cause, but it'll be some other thing that they value. Basically, what we do in our lives is the answer to your question already. It happens on its own.
Yeah. So let me ask it. Let me ask it a little bit differently. So I don't. Yeah, I agree with you. I see it as like kind of like a muscle you have to exercise. So let me put it to you this way.
Okay. That's interesting. I definitely want to hear this.
An example of this is, so, I'm a nerd. I've been one since I was a kid, and I read a lot, and I read everything. Right? I don't really discriminate about anything. My rule is, if I start a book, I finish it, even if I hate it. I just got to finish it. I cannot not finish it. I only did that one time. I'm going to get so ridiculed for saying this. Oh my goodness.
No. Do it.
I'm going to get so dragged online if people get this far in the conversation. I should not say this. I did not finish 50 Shades of Grey. I read half of it.
Okay.
And I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. I hated the book, and it was poorly written. I got through the first book of Twilight, and I hated that book, and I struggled through it, but I was like, I'm going to finish this damn book. I couldn't do it with 50 Shades. Part of the reason I do that is I like to stay abreast of some pop culture stuff, and that was all the rage for 6 months. Couldn't do it. So that's my one exception. I think that's the only book I have not finished in a decade or something. That's impressive. I always finish the books, even if they're not so good. But part of the reason I started this podcast, and part of the reason why I try to push myself to write more, part of the reason why I teach, is I want to purposefully activate the knowledge I have. I don't think knowledge just sits in your brain. I definitely think it will come out in your life. Yeah. But I do think that there needs to be, I hate this example, but it's kind of like a plant that you need to water, and you need to give it sunlight, and you need to grow it, and it takes work, right? Because you're not going to use all the information. I can't remember all the books I've read, right? I can't remember all the things that's in there. If I read a book that's, 350 pages, I'm not going to remember everything in there. You know how I remember it? You know how I use it? You know how it crystallizes? You know how it synthesizes? You know how it is? I either am discussing it, or I'm writing, or I'm, and I'm not saying that there's a one size fits all, right? People are going to do it in whatever way they want.
Their own way.
That's great. That's great. But I could be wrong on this. I do feel like sometimes people will read long form articles, or they will read certain books, and it becomes like watching reality TV. Like it's watching Real Housewives for people, or the Kardashians or something like that. It's just shuts their mind off. They're just consuming, and they don't really use it too much. Or they use pieces, but they don't use all of it. And I think if you want a robust, fulfilling, interactive way, we should be in this way, I think, a little bit slower and patient to really synthesize information, to really crystallize it. And again, you can do that whichever way you want. But I think sometimes it's a lot of like information dump, and then it just doesn't get utilized, or it gets utilized in a half-assed way. I think there should be more... not intention. I'm not necessarily saying that, but there should be some purposeful exercising of it, I guess. And I feel like sometimes that doesn't happen with just getting knowledge to fill a gap.
Yeah. Here's where I agree with you is that the hyper-mediated, world, those who participate in it heavily, and I have been one of those people. I am not currently one of those people, but I have been one of those people where it's like, 500 tabs open.
Right.
Oh, can't sit down and read a book because my brain forgot how to do it. Like literally, that was me for years. Not kidding. That has a cost. Yeah. Our brains are incredible. Like they're so amazing, and they adjust very rapidly to the way we live our lives in the moment, right? So when I was writing like umpteen blogs a day and tweeting like crazy, and that was my media job, my brain was just a harried mess.
Yeah.
I didn't stop thinking, and I don't want to dismiss the way I thought. I was still pretty smart, and I was doing a lot, right? Sure. So I don't want to put too much of a value judgment, but that's where I'll agree with you. There's something about the hyper-mediated environment and the information glut that's it seems just like maybe not that great for our brains. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But really, who am I to say? I don't know. We're still figuring that out. But honestly, with the rest, to the extent that you're saying that that people need to practice this very intentionally, or they are not thinking fully, I think I disagree with you. I think that and again, I don't want to poorly describe what you said, so I will just say what I believe, which is, and this is fairly new to me, I'm realizing, but right now, at least for now, I currently have like a lot of trust that people absorb their knowledge their own way, and if they don't absorb the knowledge, it's because they weren't meant to. It's because the conditions of their own self, that knowledge isn't finding a home. It's just not finding a root. It's not grabbing hold. Okay. And there's nothing that can force that person to suddenly hold that knowledge except themselves. Which I don't mean to say that I have this philosophy that we can't influence each other. That is not what I mean.
Sure. Yeah.
But I guess I'm noticing this the first time I said this out loud. It's a really cool line of thought. But like I'm noticing that maybe after my research and my writing this book, I'm kind of walking the world right now going, everyone has their own kind of programming and I don't see it. I only see the results. I only see the results in their behaviors. I can choose to judge those behaviors and results, and I often do, and I will continue to do so. But I never know the programming.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you. I'm gonna try and sharpen what I said earlier here. So based on what you said, so let me conceptualize it this way. Yes, does everything get in and is utilized unconsciously? Yes, 100%. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we agree on that. Yeah.
Like if I'm reading something, I'm watching something, I'm talking, I'm listening, I'm doing. It's getting in there, and it's going to be, yes, we all have a different software. We all have different ways of being, different ways of expressing that. I 100% agree with you. No disagreement there. I do think that we need to have a more purposeful diet of what we consume, and then also how we exercise the information that we use in our conscious state. Obviously it's in there. Obviously we're going to use it, because I think that one of the things we're so good at as humans is we're good at lying to ourselves. Really good at it. I do it. We're all really good at that. And I can absolutely say like, yeah, I read this amount of books and I did these articles and I taught this and I did this, and it's in there and I'm using it and blah, blah, blah. And knowing that I'm being lazy, I'm not using it well. I know I'm not. I don't want to put the time. I need to exercise that at the gym, right? That's like if I'm saying the equivalent of, yeah, I'm working out because I walked around my neighborhood twice. That's not bad. That's not bad. But that's not the same as doing 30 minutes on the treadmill of cardio, or, doing some, strength and training, with weights and things like that. That's not the same thing. There's one is being active and one is working out, right? Those are two very different things. And I don't think everything needs to be that way. And I don't think everyone needs to do it the same. But I do think in whichever way it makes sense for each individual person, they should have an element that is using the knowledge that has filled their gaps purposefully.
Yeah, I agree with that in principle. I think to grab your gym analogy, I agree with that in principle, but there's still a place I think we differ. To grab your gym analogy, it's like I wouldn't tell everyone who's a member of the gym, basically, you're not doing it right unless you're doing at least this much in the gym. If you're not doing at least this much in the gym, I don't think you're doing it right, and I'm judging you for that. That gap is on you, and you're doing it wrong, right? That to me, the gym analogy would be: you're a member of the gym. What do you feel comfortable doing? I feel comfortable running on the treadmill for 10 minutes. Cool. Can you try 11? That's it.
Yeah.
And someone's, hey, spot me. I've got 100 pounds. Cool. Can you try 100 and, I don't know, 112? But yeah, not today, because I'm working. I'm also at this other gym, and that's the gym where I'm pushing myself. Cool. You know what I mean? Like I sort of feel like, again, we don't see what everybody's doing and thinking. And so, I don't know. I think like people might be at other gyms pushing themselves in other ways that we don't see because it doesn't matter to us, because it's not the knowledge that wants to hook onto our brains.
Yes, I don't disagree with you. I still think there is a little bit of daylight though between you and I on.
Yeah,
that's okay. I want to. I don't know. I want people to always be pushing themselves, and I recognize not everyone's there, and everyone's got a different journey, but there's an aspirational, I guess, piece to that I would hope people do.
Exactly. And I'll reframe something else on the gym thing too. I think if I actually was in that gym going around to everybody going, oh, that's what you do? Not enough. Can you try more? Then I would actually be a really annoying person.
Sure.
And
I'm not saying that that's what I'm doing or I want to do. I'm just saying that like in this element of each person has to be honest with themselves about how much am I actually doing? Am I lying to myself here? Could I push myself a little bit? Am I even trying?
Yes.
I think, and that has to come from within. That's not from someone else telling you that.
Yeah.
100% agree with you on that. So maybe that's where we definitely find that compromise.
I think that maybe that's where you and I actually align and agree, which is more like what I do believe, and I will say I believe for everyone, is that I believe that everyone should pay attention to their discomfort. Mm-hmm. Because
yes,
you know what I mean? That's what it is. Because for you, again, going back to the octopus, because it's such a cool example, paying attention to the discomfort you have eating octopus is pushing you somewhere.
Yes.
You don't know where, but it's good that you're paying attention to it. Yeah. So I would say that for everyone is if you are at the gym and you're going, is this enough? Pay attention to that. But if you're at the gym and you're not going, this is enough, don't worry about it. Whatever. You're at another gym or you're doing something else where that concern comes up. Cool. So I think maybe that's what I'm comfortable saying that everyone ought to do is pay attention to the discomfort and lean into it, which a lot of people say already and have said for thousands of years because it works.
Yes, you know? yes. I fully agree with you there. Well, look, I know you're a busy woman, so I don't want to take too much more of your time. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
This is so fun.
The last thing I want to just ask you about briefly, I'll use an example, right? And maybe it won't work, maybe it will, but the last part of the book, you talk about people, you talk about values, you talk about how we shouldn't make assumptions. We're going to have blind spots. You talk about the power of experience, how people have different values and they have, all these different things, contradictions, complexities. And so everyone should buy your book and read all about it. But let me use an example here.
Okay. Just
to illustrate, and we can end on this. I'm going to read this to you. It came out today, so we're recording this in mid-January, so it's be dated by the time I release it, but whatever. This has been trending for months now. There's a new poll by Quinnipiac that shows that Joe Biden's approval rating has collapsed. There's those words that you like. Collapsed, right?
Collapsed. In a heap of rubble.
Right. It has collapsed among Hispanics and is now lower than his rating among whites. And there's obviously more data on this, but it shows that 28% of Hispanics approve of Biden's performance, and whites approve 32%. Biden is negative 23 points with Hispanics, signaling a seismic shift in American politics. Now, this is just month after month after month, the news on Hispanics with Democrats is progressively going the opposite direction. And I think some Democrats are kind of like getting it. Very few. They're like, we kind of need to figure this out as the fastest growing or largest, minority group in the United States. But a lot of people still are just like, nope, there's no problem here. Nothing to see. They'll still vote for Democrats, and because the other guy's going to be terrible, so they'll vote for Democrats. And I've talked about this. We've talked about this before, but and this is kind of like on a big scale thing, so you can break this down individually. And I'm bringing this piece up not because we're both Latin, although maybe a little bit, but because you've talked about this as well. How do we get people to not make these assumptions about, so in my example, you're Latin, so you vote Democrat, right? You talked about this, right? Or you must care about immigration, right? Because, like there's a bunch of people, you're Mexican, right? Don't you have family that's at the border right now? I mean, that stuff, right? How do we know? What we do know is that, you and I know this, right? But trying to explain this to people in the United States that aren't Latin, well, A, it's an ethnicity for a reason. B, terribly diverse. It's just terribly, like, within group diversity for Latinos is nuts. It's nuts. Yeah. You have different immigration waves. I have people in my family that immigrated here from South America, people in my family that immigrated here from Central America at different times and for different reasons. And their immigration experience is wildly different. People have immigrated here legally in my family, illegally in my family, right? And you can even see, like, for folks in like Cuba and in South Florida, there's like 4 waves of immigration since 1959 now for Cuban Americans. And that's wildly different. Like, coming here in 59 is much different than Cubans that came here in like 2005. A wildly different immigration experience. even from the same country, even under the same regime. So anyways, you can go on and on and on. There's so much diversity. Latinos in Arizona and Nevada are different than West Texas and South Florida, and then everywhere else in between. How do we foster this way of not having these blind spots? We don't make assumptions. We don't say what this group or a person in front of me's values are because they're Latin or maybe we assume they're Catholic or whatever. How do we focus? I just use that example because it's salient and kind of easy to use instead of just talking about the ideas.
Woo.
It's a hard one. Just give me the broad brushstrokes.
Yeah, it comes back to whoever is underrepresented in your life will be overrepresented in your imagination. The next bit of that is that whoever is overrepresented in your imagination, you will believe whatever they tell you about those people. Yeah. Who tells you, whoever else is in your silence. I don't know. Or barring that, just whatever the consensus story appears to be in mainstream society, which, by the way, is always too simple.
Yes.
Always without fail. Yes. And it will be most simple about the things that are least mainstream understood. So that's the universe we're in. So, I mean, you know, you and I both know like Angel Eduardo, right? He's in New York City.
It's a good friend.
Like,
yeah.
You know, all around New York. If you grow up in New York, if you grow up in Miami, this is not a problem for you. You are surrounded by Hispanic diversity.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by it. It's unquestioned, right?
Yes.
Other parts of the country, like Seattle, frankly, tons of stereotypes about Latin Americans because, I don't know, not as present and integrated as other parts of the country like Miami and New York. So so that's it. Like, one is to understand that, again, it's about our own paths through this world and what we're exposed to and what we're not. So I mean, how you get people to not make those assumptions, they have to actually meet. Yeah. They have to meet different people who are part of one group and see their differences as part of their humanity.
And I think going to the other point that you said of kind of stretching your boundary, being curious, is people have to want to do that. And I think where my like, I don't know, where I feel passionate about is how do you inspire people that maybe don't want to give it a chance, to give it a shot, to maybe, oh, okay, that's interesting. Or maybe I could consider it. I never really would have, but you know what? Why not? It's hard, I think, for some people to want to do that.
I think that's right. I think
some people feel like they need to, or they move to a new place and they're like, oh, well, here they have Thai food and Indian food, and my neighbor is from, you know, Bangladesh, and my other neighbor is from, you know, Colombia. And like, well, I'm here, so I have to kind of figure this out. That's a little different, but I think what's even harder, the harder reach is for people that they don't have to, and they don't maybe want to,
and they don't know, they don't want to. And what I would say to that is, what you do is you make a bit of an effort to give them an "I never thought of it that way" moment based on what they do want.
Nice.
Based on what they do want. And here's what I think everybody wants, particularly people most distraught by the divide, most affected by the polarization. We all want to see a less scary world. We all want to feel more powerful in this world. So if nothing else, I know we all want that.
Yeah.
And I think that seeing more of the complexity in what we don't understand always turns the fear down.
Yeah.
Always turns the volume down, so that we're not walking around going, enough.
Yeah.
You know, get up close to those things you don't understand, and it will happen.
Yeah.
Every time. So but this is, again, like, this is another reason why it's so important to go up to people and hear about them, listen to them, because you go, what about the people who don't want to know what I think they ought to want to know? Well, good luck. You're not going to get them to want something that you want. You're not.
Yeah.
What you have to learn is what they want. And chances are, if what you think they should want is actually that important, they do want it. They just don't know they do. So trust that and go find that path for them. That, I think, is the only persuasion, the persuasion that the other person doesn't know they want, but they do want. You have to find out what that is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's, you know, part of the work. my very last question for you is, this is your first book.
Yep.
And it's great. And, you know, I've heard people say before that, you know, books are kind of like, you know, kids or whatever. It's just like this thing you've been carrying and you finally it's out in the world and all this stuff. What is the number one thing people read this book, and what is the number one thing that you want them to be like, to take away from it? Like, yes, they got it. They read the book. They got exactly what they're saying. What's that one thing you want people to pull away from reading your book?
I should ask one more curious question before I give my opinion. I should ask that person whose opinion on so-and-so has always mystified me, and I already know them, and I should ask, and I know how to do it. I can do it. I'm going to do it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Let's do this. Mm-hmm. Just that. Mm-hmm. Just an intention, something, planting seeds, you know, in folks' minds, I hope, to get them excited. Get excited about what you can learn. Mm-hmm. And understand that it's not that hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not. It's mm-hmm. one question, one conversation. And I think that's what'll change the world.
Okay. So that is absolutely wonderful. That's something that we all need to kind of heed. The book is called I Never Thought of It That Way: How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. Where can people pick up the book, and where can people find you and all your work?
Yeah, so if you go to moniguzman.com, my website, moniguzman.com, you'll find links to order the book and all kinds of other stuff. Follow me on social media at Moni Guzman on Twitter, Instagram, all the crazies, and because they really are. Mm-hmm. And you can sign up for my newsletter at bit.ly/reclaimcuriosity.
All right, that's fabulous. Monica, it's always so much fun talking to you. I always feel like it's too short, and so I'm always greedy for your time, but this was really a blast. You're doing great stuff without all the things you're involved in. Your book's great, and so I just can't say enough thanks for coming on and talking to me for these couple hours.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me on. This conversation has already made this day so much more awesome. So thank you. Thank you for getting me thinking different.
Likewise.
I love it.
All righty. Thank you.